my name is Fran, and I know what you're all thinking as you look at me. That guy has mommy issues. Well, you're wrong. I have daddy issues. But in my defense, my dad also has daddy issues. His own father never solved a problem without the use of a belt. And although my own father vowed never to hit us, and he never did, mind games are still on the table. My dad and I are very, very polarly different men. I think you can look at me and tell what kind of personality I have and the kind of person who rides a unicycle in a studio apartment. My father, on the other hand, grew up in the 50s. He was in the Air Force as well. And then he got out and immediately got a very steady, good job at an airline company. And he did that job for 35 years until he retired. And then a year after he retired, he went back to work because he hated being retired. And at 75 years old, he is still going strong, and he has worked for quite literally 62 years of his life. Yes, I have not done that, and I do not plan to. And, I very much try to find myself as a youth in what I wanted to do, because he very much hammered down that a job makes a man, and you need to do something that's productive to society, and you need to help people. But you also need to do something that helps yourself and gets you good money and has stability. The things that parents want from their sons. Though my dad delivered that with a lot more curse words and emphasis. And so when I was about, when I was young, I think like many kids, you always feel, because I grew up in a big house with 7 total of us kids, and I always felt like my dad never had my back, only my siblings. And I think a lot of kids feel that way. Until I spoke to him at 18 years old, and I asked him, just jokingly, how come it always seemed like you had their back and you never had my back in arguments? You always took their side. And he goes, oh, because I did. What? Why did you always take their side? Oh, you were right way too often. No kid needs to be right that often. Thanks. Going back just a little bit, when I was about 15 years old, I decided on passion and love and things that I saw that I really wanted to do stand-up comedy. It was something that I'd seen people do and something that I really enjoyed, so I wanted to do it. But I was very nervous speaking to my dad about this for obvious reasons and what he would think. So I went up to him and I said, Dad, I really want to do an open mic. I want to do stand-up. And he goes, but you're not funny. I said, thanks, but I'm going to try anyway. So at 15 years old, my dad on a Tuesday night drives me to a bar and drops me off and goes, be done in 2 hours, I'll be back. And then he leaves. He really does leave. I thought he was gonna stick around in the parking lot. Nope, he left. I think he watched the movie, I never asked. But I did the set and I loved it. I had a great time, it was a good thing. I couldn't help but think, like, I really wish he or my mom were here, but whatever, they're not gonna come. It's just not their vibe. So I kept doing stand-up. I loved it. I fell in love with it right then and there. And I did it for about 2 years after that. So when I was around 17, the places around me, I knew them well, and one of the show hosts was doing a comedy contest. It was a big thing, it was a big deal, and the first place winner would win $300. And I was like, ooh, I gotta get in on that. But more than anything than winning $300 as a teenager, it would be, if I won this money, I could convince my dad that this is something that I'm good at. This is something that he'd approve of, which he never had. So I invite him to the show. And luckily, the show was on his one day off. So he had to say yes. And so he takes me to this comedy contest, this big competition, and he takes a seat in the front row. And I am terrified. And I am the second to last person to go up on stage. I'm not even really paying attention to the audience. There's some laughs, there's some not laughs, things are going on. I'm backstage just like dreading every second of what is happening. And finally, it comes my turn, and I haven't even looked at him this whole time because I know how he is. He's stoic, and he's stone cold, so I know what's going to happen. So sure enough, though, I go on stage, and I tell my joke, which I used to open with the joke because I was, 17, but I looked 14. And my first joke was, man, it's really hard to find a school bus that picks me up at this time. And that usually got laughs, thank you. And the audience enjoyed it, except for my dad, who was just looking up at me like. So I keep going, and I tell another joke, and I mention how big my family is. And I was like, the one good thing about coming from this big family is that you'd expect my parents to be strict, but I never have to tell them when I bring friends over. I think they just think it's another one of theirs. And that got a big laugh, except for my dad, who definitely didn't enjoy that one. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I just gotta give up on that and just go for my set, because he's not gonna laugh. So I keep going, and I do the rest of the show, and he doesn't even snicker the entire way through. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. That is who my dad is. And, it ends, I walk back downstage, I'm talking to some of the comics, and the next comedian goes up, and he immediately gets way more laughs than any of us. And I'm like, oh my God, like that guy's gonna win, because it's judged by applause. That guy's got it. And people are laughing and laughing and laughing way more than anyone. And I'm like, oh my God. So I look at the front row, and my dad is over the table, he's laughing so hard. Just dying, just absolutely in tears. I thought he was dying. I legitimately was worried. No, he's just laughing. He's having the time of his life. And I am fucking furious. So I'm looking at him, and I'm just angry now. So finally, the comedian finishes, and we get back up on stage, and the judge comes over, and he's touching us and seeing which one of us won. And of course, gets to me, and there's some applause, and my dad is just staring at me like I'm in a lineup. And then I'm like, well, he's not gonna vote for anybody. He just wouldn't attract attention like that. And then he goes over to the guy, and my dad stands up to clap. Thanks. So that guy won, and I didn't, of course. And then as we're leaving, it is a quiet ride home, because my dad doesn't speak and I don't want to speak. Finally, halfway through the ride car home, I look at my dad and I go, why didn't you vote for me? And he goes, I had to vote for you? And I go, yeah, I could have won. And he's like, why did you want me to lie to you? And that's my dad. That's my dad in a nutshell. But and I talked about that story a lot in the next 10 years of my life. Not to my dad, to my therapist. But I brought it up to him because I got back into stand-up, I'm very happy to say, because at 18 I joined the Army. I did that for 6 years, and then I went to college. And then after all that's over, about 3 months ago, I got back into stand-up. I'm very happy to say that. Something that I really enjoy doing, and I told my dad about it. And I know when I mentioned it, I mentioned that, and I mentioned the story I just told you all, expecting him not to remember. And not only did he remember that time, he didn't remember me, he remembered the guy's set, which he proceeded to tell me because he couldn't forget it because it was so funny. And I wish I was kidding. But then I told him that I was going back. And he goes, well, I think it's good that you're going back to stand up. And I go, you do? You've never seemed like you do. He's like, well, I never thought you were funny, but you really liked it, and I could tell that. And, that's my dad. And as someone who now has a 4-year-old and, is trying to impart a lot of lessons on him, I am taking a lot of the lessons that my dad taught me and a lot of his ways. But I will probably still laugh at his damn jokes. Thank you, guys.